Hi, I'm Mick Davie, your iFit guide, and today we're here in Anatolia, central Turkey. I'm going to bring you to see the namesake wild horses of Cappadocia. Then we'll make our way to an underground city, and we'll climb up and around a natural rock tower, the Uchisar Castle. And finally, we'll finish with a surprise. Let's get started. So horses have been a central aspect of this landscape for thousands of years. Look at these beautiful creatures. And the domestication of the horse was one of the most significant and consequential innovations in human history. This ability to harness horsepower transformed political, economic, and social relationships throughout the ancient world. The name Cappadocia is derived from the Persian word Cappadocia, which means the land of the beautiful horses, a tribute to the equine-based community that has lived here for centuries. The region was first inhabited by ancient Hittites around 1800 BC, and later 4th century Christian refugees who were fleeing persecution from the Roman Empire, only to realize that the refuge they were seeking literally lay within the earth. Is the most unexpected. Prior to the advent of mechanized warfare, the horse was an essential component of battle. Horses were vital to the people of this area's survival throughout ancient history. The invention of the horse-drawn chariot enabled Hittites to establish their dominance and become an empire. With archers mounted on chariots, Hittites drove out the Assyrians and unified Asia Minor around 1700 BC. These horses continued to provide a strategic military advantage for centuries to come. Warring raiders like Romans, Arabs, and Mongols were always passing through this region, and the locals relied on their breeding of these fine horses for protection, but also for transportation, hunting, and most importantly, looking over this desert-like, rock-strewn landscape, it isn't hard to picture warring tribes, Romans, Seljuks, Persians passing through here. And for the people who lived in this region, life was precarious. They needed to find a way to survive these periodic bloodbaths. And they came up with an extraordinary plan, one which was so clever and so well disguised that it was only recently discovered. And it's right below my feet. Come and check this out. So this is the Kaymakli underground city, and it's one of 36 known underground cities which are scattered across the region of Cappadocia. Now, I hope you're not claustrophobic, because the underground cities are not for the faint of heart. The tunnels can be low and narrow and difficult to get around. Let's head in this way. So much of Kaymakli was believed to have been dug during the 7th and 8th century BC. Ancient Phrygians were thought to have first inhabited the above-ground spires centuries before the time of Christ, and they began by carving into the malleable, soft rock, volcanic rock, first tunneling into those spires above ground. Then they developed this narrow, low, short-ceiling cave system and developed homes down here, banquet halls, storehouses, and even a place to press wine. Each of these rooms to my left and right is built around an air shaft, and some of these air shafts penetrate down 180 feet. And now, around 300 BC, Kaymakli was actually colonized by persecuted Christians, and these geological formations became an underground salvation from enemy invasion. So along with the primary protection of women and children, these tunnels also protected horses and livestock. And here on the first floor, you can see these troughs carved into the walls, and these were used to provide storage space for feed and grain to feed the animals. Over here, there were areas where chickens and other birds were kept to provide eggs for the people who lived down here. These little alcoves carved high in the wall were where oil lanterns or candles were placed to provide light. And over here you can see these little pillars carved into the rock, and that's where animals were tied up. Let's get down a little deeper into this cave system. So come and check this out. This enormous wheel of stone was used by the people who lived down here to roll across tunnel entranceways to prevent enemy soldiers from penetrating deeper into the cave system. Allegedly, it took 6 or 8 very strong soldiers to lift this using metal levers to roll it across the doorways. Let's keep going up this way. So this is the second floor down below ground level. This area up ahead of me was a food storage area for people. There were grains stored in here. And remember, there were at times up to 5,000 people living underground in this cave system. Here is the main kitchen area of the cave system, and like in many homes, it's one of the larger and more comfortable areas. You can see the blackened roof from some of the soot from the cooking. And there was actually a team of professional chefs who worked down here, and they cooked only once a week, and they cooked at midnight so that the smell of the cooking and the smoke couldn't be seen and couldn't be smelled by enemy soldiers who were camped out on the ground up above. There was a very sophisticated ventilation system just over in that corner over there. This is probably what was a mortar and pestle stone where different spices and nuts and herbs were ground up and added to the food that was served to the people here. One of the really interesting things that archaeologists have talked about in regard to this cave system is that there may well have been a social structure where the poorest people, immigrants from other regions who came here, the poorest people lived deepest in the cave system. And these caves actually go down another 5 floors. The middle class lived in the middle of the cave system, and the richest people lived on the 1st and 2nd floors above us, where there was the greatest access to fresh air through the ventilation pipes from the surface. Let's go a little deeper. And it's absolutely amazing to me that a cave system this big existed undetected, underground, for centuries. It's so big and so complex. One could get lost down here very, very easily. And the extraordinary thing is, this is not even the biggest of the cave complexes. There is another cave complex about 50 kilometers from here called Derinkuyu, which is about twice the size of this complex, and it's actually 18 stories deep. So if you're claustrophobic, you definitely don't want to visit that one. Here we go, heading down to the 4th story underground. Archaeologists think that it was small rooms like this that would have housed poor families. So an impoverished Christian family or pre-Christian family would have lived in a small space like that, not very well ventilated, very deep in the cave system. Further up here, as we ascend higher and higher, we have a series of middle-class residential areas, a little bit closer to the surface and quite a lot larger than the room that we just saw below. If you want to take a quick look in there, this would have been the kind of space that a small middle-class family would have lived in. This was possibly a sleeping area, and you can see up here there was access to other spaces. There was this interconnectedness between the living spaces. And, you know, as I wander through here, it makes me think what it must have been like for the people who lived down here. At the moment, it feels sort of quite calm and tranquil, even soothing to be this deep underground, where it's cool and the light is low and soft. But imagine what it must have been like to be huddled down here with your family, with your children, while there were wars raging on the ground above. And you would have had no idea whatsoever what was happening to your home on the ground level, what was happening to the plants that you, or the crops that you had planted the previous season, or even what the fate was of your relatives who hadn't managed to escape down here. It must have been absolutely terrifying. So when threatened by their enemies, the Kaymakli residents would retreat into these tight spaces and roll wheels of millstone to block entranceways like this, not unlike something you might have seen in an Indiana Jones movie or the Flintstones. And with enough grain and water and wine stored down here, these troglodyte people could allegedly sustain themselves in these dark passages for days and weeks at a time as war raged on the ground above their heads. Some light would be provided into these areas by shafts that were dug 100 meters down from the land above. So there are very few written records about this underground city, but some archaeologists believe that this was in fact a church. And over here, they believe this was an altar dedicated to Jesus, and this was an altar dedicated to Mary. On the wall over here are carved 2 crucifixes, one in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, the other in the Roman tradition. So even as recently as the 20th century, these caves allowed for people to save themselves from persecution administered during the Ottoman Empire. It was actually not until 1923, after the controversial population exchange between Greece and Turkey, that the underground cities were finally abandoned, and then they weren't rediscovered again until 1963. And the story goes that a resident found a strange room behind a wall inside his house. He knocked on that wall, it crumbled away and led to this cave system. And the rest is history. Finally, some light and fresh air. So in this area, you've got two options. You either bury down underground or you climb up the fairy chimneys. So we've been down to the deepest depths back at the Kaymakli underground city, so it's time to get some fresh air as we make our way up to the top of Uchisar Castle. It's a magnificent stone monolith, nearly 200 feet tall, and it's honeycombed on the inside with cave dwellings. You're going to get your heart rate up, you'll probably get a little bit of a sweat on, and you'll definitely feel your machine start to kick up as we climb to the top of this centuries-old citadel. So the castle, the Uchisar Castle, represents the zenith of Cappadocia. It's perhaps the most prominent landmark for miles around. By the way, if you need to, grab some water because the climb can be quite steep up here. I know that I'm feeling it in my legs already, but the challenge is worth it because the view from the top is a 360-degree panorama all the way across these magnificent valleys, these moonscapes around here, including the Pigeon Valley, which is just down below us. So the rock face up here is eroded so that it resembles a ruined castle. It's not like a built European castle. And it has a sort of cylindrical shape. And this massif up here is crisscrossed by underground passageways and rooms, which are now mostly sealed off because they're structurally unsound, and it would be quite dangerous for us to go into most parts of this. But they did once serve as residential areas, as well as cloisters for nuns and monks during the Byzantine times, much like the Kaymakli underground city did. Originally, around 1,000 people were believed to have lived inside this castle. It would have just been teeming with people. The structure itself consists of two enormous fairy chimneys that are very close to one another. It actually looks like one structure, and it's full of hollowed out cubes, warehouses, cisterns for water as we get closer to the summit up here. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely feeling this. I'm kind of getting out of breath. Try and keep up. You're doing great. We're nearly at the top, where we'll be rewarded by a wonderful view. Uchisar is actually a city that sits quite centrally on what was once called the Silk Road, which was a trading route or network of trading routes that stretched all the way from China to North Africa and into Europe. And we just pause here for a second to catch our breath and just have a look out at this magnificent view. Down here below us, this is called the Pigeon Valley. And if we look closely into the rock face, you can see these beautifully carved little pigeonholes. And the people, the residents of Uchisar, created those holes in the facade to attract pigeons into the area. They would collect the pigeon droppings and use it to fertilize their gardens and the soil that produced their crops in the farms around here. And here we are. What a view. You can see there's just this epic panorama up here. And because this city, Uchisar, was so strategically located in the middle of the old Silk Road, this castle would probably also have been used as a kind of sentry tower to keep an eye on the movement of people or potentially threatening armies moving across this region. One of the lovely little bits of history regarding the Silk Route was that the people of Uchisar and others in the central Anatolian area built these beautiful caravanserais, which were kind of like the Motel 6 of the ancient world. They were these beautifully built structures where travelers and traders and merchants who were coming through this area could stop, refresh their horses, spend the night. And they were actually allowed to stay there for 3 nights and to eat the food and the drink in those places for 3 days and nights for free. And it was all part of an effort not only to protect the travelers and traders who were going through this area, but to ensure that they came back and continued trading in this region. Congratulations, you made it to the top of the castle. Take a moment to grab a drink of water, catch your breath, and enjoy the view. And I'll see you on the way back down. So as I walk across this landscape, I'm reminded of one of my favorite people, Rumi. Rumi was a 13th century poet, theologian, and Sufi mystic. Rumi and his family fled from Central Asia and came into Anatolia, settling near here. And similar to the Christian monks who lived in the fairy chimneys, Rumi brought a message of peace and love. His message was to be as compassionate as the sea when you are listening, as silent as the night when you know of your friend's faults, and all these things to give you more compassion and empathy towards people, as opposed to a spirit of judgment and division. It was a message of universal love, but he wasn't naive. Rumi had one follower who saw a pack of dogs sleeping bundled together, and he said, "Look at them, they're so happy. I wish mankind could be as kind and nice as them." And Rumi said, "Well, throw a bone in between them and let's see how friendly they really are." Rumi believed passionately in the use of music, poetry and dance as a path for reaching God. For Rumi, music helped devotees to focus their entire being on the divine, and to do this so intensely that the soul was both destroyed and resurrected. It was from these ideas that the practice of whirling dervishes developed into a ritual form. His teachings became the basis for the order of the Mevlevi. Rumi encouraged sama, listening to music, and turning or doing the sacred dance in the Mevlevi tradition. Sama represents a mystical journey of spiritual ascent through mind and love to the perfect one. And in this journey, the seeker symbolically turns towards the truth, grows through love, abandons the ego, finds the truth, and arrives at the perfect. The seeker then returns I've had a wonderful time here in Cappadocia. I'm Mick Davie, your iFit guide. See you next time.